I'm always looking for new ways to improve my primitive survival skills, so this year I'm doing a wild food challenge where I'm gathering, hunting, and fishing for as much wild food as possible to incorporate into my diet. I've started this challenge by studying the different types of wild foods Pacific Northwest Native Americans traditionally relied on to survive. This included several different types of bulbs and roots, including a root called Yampa. Historically, Native Americans routinely burned vast areas in western Oregon to promote and maintain the wet prairie environments that support many of their traditional foods. Yampa root was an important food source that was collected in great abundance. It is similar in appearance to carrot, but more closely resembles a water chestnut in flavor and texture. The Yampa plant is known by many different names. Several tribes in Oregon referred to it as Epos, and in one journal entry dated May 18, 1806, Lewis and Clark describe how Sacagawea spent the day collecting Yampah root, which is the Shoshone word for Yampah. Where I live in the Willamette Valley of Western Oregon, 2 of the 13 species of Yampa can be found growing. This includes Oregon Yampa and Gardner's Yampa. The Yampa plant is a member of the parsley family that has white, umbel-shaped flowers and thin, thread-like leaves that resemble grass. Gardner's Yampa is the taller of our 2 local species. When mature, it reaches a height of 3 to 5 feet. This species also has the larger edible roots that are usually found growing in pairs or groups of 3 on mature plants. The second species we have growing in the Willamette Valley is the smaller Oregon Yampa, which usually reaches a height of 1 to 3 feet. The roots of Oregon Yampa are smaller, more round, and about the same size and shape as a shelled peanut. Oregon Yampa also has the same white, umbel-shaped flower and thin, thread-like leaves. Before we talk about how to harvest and eat Yampa, I need to stress how important it is to be able to identify this plant with 100% certainty. There are many other plants in this family that have very similar features, such as the white umbel-shaped flowers. I found all 4 of these flowers growing next to each other in a field. Here I have a clear example of why proper identification is so important. I found both of these plants growing next to each other in a field. The one on the left is Yampa, but the one on the right is one of the most poisonous plants in North America. This deadly lookalike is poison hemlock, which is a very common, non-native, weedy plant that originally came from Europe. One key identifying characteristic for poison hemlock is red spots on the stalk. Poison hemlock is very dangerous. If consumed, the toxins in this plant will disrupt the workings of the central nervous system. Ingesting even a small amount can result in paralysis of the respiratory muscles, which lead to respiratory collapse and death. Poison hemlock is so toxic that in ancient Greece it was used to poison condemned prisoners as a form of capital punishment. It is reported that in 399 BC, the philosopher Socrates died after being forced to drink a mixture of poison hemlock. Another, even more toxic plant I found growing next to Yampa is water hemlock. This plant has the same white umbel-shaped flowers, shiny leaves, and no red spots on the stalk. Every part of this plant is toxic. Consuming just a small number of leaves, seeds, or roots will lead to frothing of the mouth, nervousness which turns into tremors, muscular weakness, seizures, respiratory failure, and death. The most toxic part of this plant is the tuberous root system, which features a multi-chambered structure. Another similar plant that is not toxic, but can easily be confused with Yampa, is wild carrot, also known as Queen Anne's lace. These 2 plants have very similar features and are often found growing next to each other. It's another example of why proper identification is so important when collecting wild food. Traditionally, Yampa was harvested using a digging stick. The edible roots can be found growing between 1 and 3 inches deep. I like to collect Yampa in the fall after it has gone to seed. The act of disturbing the soil can actually improve Yampa production. I have found that Yampa is more common in areas that have received routine harvest than areas that have been left alone. Yampa root is a great source of carbohydrates and is very tasty raw, baked, boiled, dried, or roasted. The seeds of the Yampa plant are also edible and can be used as a flavoring similar to fennel seed. Traditionally, Yampa was an important food source for Native Americans living in the Pacific Northwest. I look forward to including Yampa in my diet as part of my wild food challenge.